So I just want to welcome our panel, and in particular Suze. As I said, Suze is part of our steering group and she has put this amazing event together. So thank you so much, Suze, on behalf of Look, and really it's over to you now.
Thank you very much, Jane. Good evening to everybody. As Jane said, my name is Suzanne and I'm mum to a fantastic young man called Zach, who is 15, and he has CVIs amongst a number of other challenges. And I'm absolutely delighted to be asked by Jane and the Look team to organise an event dedicated to CVI, which is a subject, as Jane said, I'm really passionate about, and she hears about a lot from me. CVI is a really unique journey for both the young person navigating it and for parent carers. And sadly, it's not that well understood, which means that as a parent carer navigating bringing up a child with CVI, you can often feel quite lost. But fear not, tonight we plan to share knowledge and experience from professionals and real stories that we hope you'll find really useful. Now, we have had a large number of questions on registration for the event tonight, and hopefully some of those things will be covered by the professionals speaking, but collectively we plan to put together a Q&A page after the event to provide more advice and ideas that we can't fit into the session tonight, so hopefully that will be helpful. CVI is an enormous topic to cover in any detail, but we're going to give it a go. We're going to kick things off and hear from Janet Harwood, Chair of Trustees for the CVI Society. Janet has a lifetime of experience as a QTVI specialising in CVI. We'll then hear from Steffi Satariano, who is an education psychologist and a neuropsychologist, and she has working knowledge of supporting children with CVI in education. I'm then going to share my story as mum to Zach. And as I said, he has CVI as part of a wider range of needs. And then we have two wonderful young ambassadors for the CVI Society, Sophie and Art, who'll be sharing their very unique stories and lived experiences. And if we have any time at the end, we'll try and tackle some of the questions. But I guess all I can do now is hand over to our first speaker, which is Janet Harwood. So Janet, if you want to unmute, and I'll go on to mute.
Hello, everybody. And I think there are probably some people here that I know. I am Chair of Trustees of the CVI Society, and CVI and people with CVI are my absolute passion. The condition being understood and people accessing support, because from the work that we do, we know that it is truly life-changing when someone can access appropriate support. In 30 minutes, truthfully, you're going to get a drop in the ocean, but there's contact details and things, and people want to know more. We do training for lots of groups, so you always feel free to contact us. This session may mirror the experiences of a person with CVI, because I am going to be going quickly through as much information as I can. So Art, I apologise to you, because it is really bad practice for someone with CVI. We need to give time. I noticed there being one question about vision, and I remember someone saying to me years and years ago, we don't do brains. Well, actually, you don't do vision then, because of course we need eyes to see, they're incredibly important, but what interprets and decides what we see is our brain, not the eyes. And someone with CVI, somewhere within their brain, within the visual brain, there is a dysfunction. Anyone want to have a quick go, even one of the panel, not maybe Suzanne, because she may know, and not anyone that I've trained, because I know some of you are here, how much of the brain is involved in processing visual information? Someone have a quick guess or a quick chat. Jane, if you can have a look, have a go. Just give me the first one.
Yeah, people are shy now because I said.
Perfect. My goodness,
there
someone
you
there has
go.
got it
40%. Yeah.
Yes, 40%. That's a lot of brain, isn't it? If you think about it, basically, the bit from my ears back of my head is all involved in processing visual information, not just the back bit where the nerves go back from the eyes to. So there's a lot of room for things going wrong. Right, so what are some of the common issues at the moment for families and young people? Lack of understanding of the condition, its impact, problems where there are several diagnoses or labels which exist prior to that. The things that we see commonly: autistic spectrum condition, DCD, or ADHD, DCD, developmental coordination disorder, ADHD, sort of hyperactivity. And there are many reasons that need to be ruled out that are CVI related before maybe you decide that you're going to give that person the label. And that doesn't often happen because, and I can say this quite categorically from medical contacts I have and also my own experience, because I've lectured to many of the groups involved, medics, various professionals, there is not the knowledge. There is also a condition called auditory processing disorder, which many young people with CVI have, and it's not picked up on, and if it is, often have no support. The two often go hand in hand. It's almost like the equivalent, the auditory equivalent. Lack of accurate information. As a QTVI, I know it's trying to cultivate your ophthalmologist where possible, because you can have perfect visual acuity, clarity of vision, but you may have contrast sensitivity issues, which are going to affect how you see things. Things are going to look washed out. You're not going to see faces so clearly. You may have visual field deficits, which are not routinely assessed. Lower visual field deficit is very common in CVI. This as a likely contributor to many of the diagnoses potentially of developmental coordination disorder, children who trip, stumble, a condition called optic ataxia, which again is a CVI, when you can't make the calculations to move accurately through space, because our brain's amazing. It's like a computer. Everything we do, our brain is refreshing information all around us through our visual system. And if your brain doesn't get quite that information accurately, you bump into things, maybe you trip over things. And so you've got a child who maybe someone thinks is clumsy. They don't realise that potentially any visual issues need screening out. There are also issues around funding and capacity. I really feel for so many services, for vision services, because there are teachers out there, QTVIs, with huge caseloads, 100 to 150 children, I'm hearing. So it's about pushing for change for the children that we support, because it really does make a huge difference to outcomes. Assessment, I'm not going to talk too much because I know Steffi's going to talk about this, but you only know what you know. If your child is being assessed by someone who's never even heard of CVI, you're not going to get an accurate reflection if there's something underlying going on with their vision. Educational psychologists, speech and language therapists are sort of key in assessment, often for EHCPs, for autistic spectrum diagnoses. If they've not heard of it, they're not going to understand some of the CVI behaviours. So neuropsychology, if you can get access to it, is usually very, very useful for some children as well. The children I feel for all children, but those families who go to at school saying your child doesn't seem to see things very well, or they're tripping, have you had their eyes checked? They go to the optician, your eyes are perfect. But that child may have underlying CVI and nobody realises it. The research study carried out in the West Country identified at least one child in every mainstream class. And anecdotally, the numbers in special schools are expected to be as high as between a quarter to a half. That's a lot of children who are losing out on education, and also the impact on their mental health, behaviours, anxiety. And we are seeing more and more children who are having real issues with that, and also PTSD. And in certain cases, it's not uncommon, which is really heartbreaking. Right, so how do we help these young people? It is key to find and start from the child. It sounds really, really silly, but you have to hopefully, certainly if you're a professional, from the information you can gather and find out, start from where that child is. It's no good starting top down, where you think they should be, where their class is. You have to find the level the child is functioning at and start from that. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to effectively support them. There's no generic approach or resource to support these children. anyone who tells you there is, they don't understand it. It's a huge spectrum. Every single one, even if they've got damage in the same areas, like all of us, maybe are going to respond differently because of various circumstances, education, all sorts of external factors, just character. So it really has to be an individual approach. Parent information is key. As a parent, as Suzanne said, it can be bewildering. You may not know what's going on. No one maybe even thought of something going with your vision system of your child, let alone explain it. But you have key information which can inform, support, advice. So absolutely talking to families is key. I am quite happy to say when I started my job many years ago, I was working in a service and it came to a shock. I was not allowed to speak to parents, contact them. We weren't allowed to email. Everything had to go through a managerial system. I left that very quickly because that is not how I've been used to working. And certainly I think for children that we're talking about, communication with families is absolutely key. The other thing is observation. You get to understand certain behaviours, looking at things like head movements, postures, tilts, how that child is accessing across the whole range. QTVIs, you may think, I don't get time to get in there, and I can completely understand that. You need to maybe recruit a reliable person who's in that child's class or working with them and ask them for you. Then when you do go in, you can compare notes or see how that child's behaving. Teamwork is absolutely essential. That is the thing that's going to lead to success. Parents and professionals working together and sharing information, multidisciplinary team meetings, even if there's no attendance, information needs to be shared. I used to often do an MDT meeting rather than a visit sometimes because you are hitting 6, 7, 8 members of staff and getting information across. Right, so CVI, what is it? Did any of you hear, somebody put in chat please, because sometimes it's good to interact on some things. Any of you have to think when you got up this morning about finding your clothes, putting them on, making yourself a drink? Anybody who hasn't got a vision impairment? I'm talking just general. Anybody have to think about any of that?
A little bit, Janet. I had to think about it a little bit, like what to choose, but it didn't take that much of my time.
No, but for someone with CVI, the impact starts as soon as they wake up because we're using our vision constantly. Now, for those of you who haven't got CVI, we don't have to think about it. It's unconscious. You know, so many of the things we do, we don't have to put any effort into doing. People with CVI are usually single channel processors. They can't look and listen effectively. They may appear to do, but they're processing usually through one channel at once. So you will get a child who maybe turns away to listen. Somebody doesn't understand. That's actually their strategy to make sure they can retain what they're hearing. So they get maybe told off for it. And of course, something like that in school, you can imagine trying to look at a whiteboard, trying when the teachers, I'd been guilty of this 20 odd years ago. Look at me when I'm talking to you. It's the last thing I would say to someone with CVI if I wanted them to retain information. You can't expect someone with CVI maybe to look and do at the same time, especially if it's a new thing. The key thing to think about as well is you can only see what is visible to you. Now that's pretty obvious, or it should be, for someone with an ocular vision impairment. You would not expect someone with a severe ocular vision impairment maybe to be able to see and respond or need something that's adapted. But with CVI, even for people with good acuity, many at times will see very little. And we're going to talk about the factors that will influence their ability to use their vision. And again, because it's a broad spectrum, we're talking about bandwidth. We were talking about bandwidth earlier and why we don't have cameras on. If you think of our brain as a computer, people with CVI have maybe reduced bandwidth. And depending how severe it is as to how much bandwidth they have to use vision. So we're thinking about the things that are going to affect that. And even in someone who in theory has got good acuity and only got CVI, that can be very significantly affected their ability to see and to function. And we'll think about that. If you look at literature, you'll see something called dorsal stream and ventral stream dysfunction. The dorsal stream is the unconscious, and because it's the thing that's most usually affected in CVI, that's often why people don't really understand it, because most of us can do these things without thinking about it. If you were in your house, did you have to think maybe about getting up, walking into your kitchen without bumping into anything most of the time? If you've got good vision, in theory, no, you don't. Do you think about finding certain things? Quite often not. For someone with CVI, the world is like looking for that needle in a haystack much of the time. Dorsal stream dysfunction, things that are affected by our dorsal stream in our brain, which is the ability to find where something is and move towards it accurately with accurate body movements. Find that book on the shelf, find that piece of clothing in the drawer. Some of this might ring bells to some of you who are parents, or for a child maybe who's got very significant disabilities as well as CVI. Make a choice for that toy, even respond to something visually. So our dorsal stream affects visually guided movement, visual fields, deficits are common, depth perception, 3D that we need for steps and things like this, 3D vision. It's not uncommon for children not to have good 3D vision. Difficulty with complex visual scenes which will impair that person's performance. The world is a cluttered place, and clutter is the enemy of people with CVI. When I was working in schools, and even now if I work with children and when we go to conference, I always wear plain coloured clothing. I've got earrings in tonight. I've allowed myself my jewellery because things like that can be a distractor. Pattern, particularly for someone with severe CVI, can mean that they will not see something, especially if something is put against pattern. Distress in busy or crowded environments. Again, you're moving through clutter. That child may not be able to judge the speed of someone coming towards them, and just the fact of being totally overwhelmed. Is someone going to bump into me? We see children who maybe want to be in a pushchair. I used to work with someone who used a wheelchair at times, an older child who didn't need it normally, but they felt safe. It was almost like being in their vehicle. They knew somebody couldn't bump into them. Visual attention, not like attention like when my mother would have said to me when I was younger, pay attention. With CVI, often someone will see something, and whatever they see, that is the thing that will take their attention, the thing that they see first. There is a condition called simultanagnosia as part of CVI, where many people can only see one or two things at once. You imagine that in a busy classroom or a busy place. They're looking at something, they've got their focus on something, somebody takes their attention or expects them to look somewhere else, and that thing may not exist. If their brain is working more slowly or the visual system working more slowly, they may not see what you think they're seeing. I tend to think of it like if we think of a jigsaw, a room or an environment or something like a jigsaw, we see the whole jigsaw quite easily usually. For someone with CVI, pieces may be missing. They may only be seeing bits of the whole. But to make it even worse, those bits move and shift and change. So you can see why busy places, the unfamiliar, is very, very challenging, especially for young children. And you think about it, their vision, you have to accept their vision is normal. If they're born with this, they don't know how you see or I see. This is their world. So we have to try to enter that child's world. Difficulties with movement, because people with CVI are processing through the visual system more slowly, they do not maybe see things sometimes at the speed they're happening. So we can think about that one. Facial expressions that they may miss, and where they're with one person on their own, feeling quite calm, even if they recognise facial expressions, because there's a part of the brain that recognises faces that many people with CVI it doesn't work. It doesn't mean they don't like people or they have no empathy. It just means, pardon me, they don't recognise faces. So facial expressions, fast-moving objects. Think about teachers. I used to wander the classroom when I was teaching 15 and 16-year-old boys. You didn't stand still. For CVI, that would not be good news, because that child is having to try, and especially if you've got someone who's got maybe eye movement issues, keeping in the same place. Liquid. Any of you got children or work with children maybe who appear clumsy, they can't judge, when they're filling a cup? Liquid moves. So, you know, there are strategies for this. Slow things down, give them something smaller to pour from and into. People moving around, playgrounds. You can't see your friend's face because there's too much to see. They're all moving. You're processing more slowly, so you don't know how people are. Cars, safety, traffic, balls, sports. So all these things that I'm mentioning, hopefully, is ticking some of the areas that we need to be thinking about for these children. Not being able to split attention between the senses, not being able to maybe look and listen effectively, and certainly not listen, look and do sometimes. Many people with CVI don't know where sound is coming from either. They can't localize sound. So sounds that seem to come out of nowhere, which they might seem to overreact. It might be scaring. Things like hand dryers in toilets and things are a common thing that children can be frightened of. We also have a sound library. Just so we have a visual library that builds up from being born, our ventral stream, which is conscious, bits in our brain that learn to recognize. It's like a little filing cabinet. We have an area on the right temporal that recognizes faces, facial expressions, and allows us to find our way. On the left side, it recognizes objects, letters, or numbers. So you may have a child who doesn't actually recognize objects. You may have a child who struggles with faces and also is not very good at finding their way. In the worst case scenario, they may not be able to do it at all. Can you imagine in a school situation, you can recognize some things, but not another, or even as a family wondering why this is so for your child? And for those children, they need to often learn through tactile resources because that system is not working. Touch is incredibly important, developing the use of touch and tactile learning, because it also removes a lot of the tiredness that some of these children feel and the exhaustion. Right. So think about children who don't communicate through language, who are non-verbal, who everybody assumes maybe are recognizing certain things. Maybe they don't. I know lots of people with CVI who are able to tell us they don't recognize things in 2D. They don't recognize charts, maps, diagrams. They find it really difficult. And yet we're assuming, and we're using maybe resources with children who have no verbal language, that they are not going to recognize. And then it's very easy to put everything down to cognitive, especially if someone has got that learning disability label anyway, when actually we could be talking about access. So what affects visual function? What's going to affect? And some of you as parents have probably noticed this: health. I've known parents who said to me, I know my child's poorly because they're not seeing so well, they're falling, they don't appear to see things so well. Time. The speed that I'm doing this at tonight would be far too quick. Giving someone time to process, especially adjusting it if they're tired. Where they are, busy, cluttered environments, large settings often don't work. Anxiety and stress. All the anxiety and stress affects all of us, but for someone with CVI, all these things are magnified. The speed that something is at, or the speed something's carried out at, something moving quickly may not be seen. That child may not see that ball moving. They may not see that car in the street. Visual field deficits. They may not see things because nobody's identified they've got a visual field deficit, incredibly common. I set up a clinic with our eye hospital when I was working, where we had some shocking cases. It was somewhere set aside especially to assess children who were considered hard to assess. We had 2 children identified there, both in special schools. One who was 18, one almost 20, who were registered blind, and no one had noticed that. We have picked up 2 children in mainstream through the charity where the same thing in the past 2 years has happened. They were in mainstream school and nobody recognised how severe visual field deficits were. And obviously you can only learn from what you can see, and you can only learn if it's presented in the right way. So that has had massive impact on a child's learning. So visual fields, really important to get them checked. Do your own homework if you're QTVI, observation, test things out, and then approach your eye hospital and ask them very nicely if they'll assess that child for you and give a diagnosis. Equally the same with parents. Education. Settings, huge settings do not work. for many of these children. Just that navigating the noise, the clutter, and for children with diagnoses of autistic spectrum condition and other things where there are special units, even visual resource bases where the child's expected to go out into the main school, it is not necessarily helpful, and certainly not for autistic spectrum condition. I know that leads in the field would agree with me medically that CVI is a medical diagnosis. If a child has an EHCP, it should be seen as a main primary need on that EHCP. And I would certainly say it should feature in every single area, because potentially it affects every single area of a child's life. Why are big places so difficult? When you've come into a different room, unless you've got a vision impairment, you can map that room pretty quickly. If you've got any level of vision impairment, you may be a cane user, it's going to take you longer to find your way around. For a child with CVI, they have to consciously map any change to their environment. Factor in movement, clutter, that makes it even harder. Factoring that those things mean they will see less means that change like this is very, very difficult for these children. It causes confusion, distress. The worst times often for them, ironically, are reception in primary school and nursery, because everything changes. 1 week it's this, 1 week it's that. And it's almost like when you've got a blind child and you think, oh, good grief, you know, this thing's moved, but they can't block the clutter out. So it can be very, very difficult. The other thing is, when a child gets a diagnosis, not to assume that they have understood concepts and things which require vision to understand them, or that they've recognised things. I work with a young lady who is now she managed to get a package because of what had happened to her at post 18. Very bright, has cerebral palsy, incredibly bright. She, when she was in school, had been made, well, not made fun of, but told off because she'd asked what something was on a post. And someone said to her, mailbox. Does anyone know what she thought it was, a mailbox? Can anyone type in quickly? Because I've only got about 6-7 minutes. No thoughts. Right, this is a young person who's very good at IT. She uses email and things a lot. So to her, a mailbox was email. She had never seen a postbox, although they'd walked past one lots of times, because no one had ever stood. She'd never had time to maybe process what one was, to realise that there were different sorts. There were postboxes on sticks, or mailboxes people outside the house. The same young person had never realised that in their kitchen, this thing in the wall was a double oven, because she'd never been there to see, or never really noticed, not she'd never been there to see her mother using it. And it was just one day by chance that she realised what this was. So you cannot assume. There is a lot of backfilling. You always need to check that that child has had that experience. This impacts upon language development, literacy, all sorts of things. Right, somebody had mentioned about access phonics. I know there was a question on this one. Phonics, I'm afraid, for some children with CVI, quite a large group, don't work. I can empathise with you, because similar issues with some of the schools I went into. In case of one, I actually said, do you want this child to read or not? Yes. Well, I'm afraid we have to look at whole word reading, and maybe starting at CVC type symbols that you could trace, where you've got similar groups of letters for the brain to recognise. I haven't time to talk too much about that. If anybody wants to know more, you can always contact me. I'll put a link to an article I wrote on print size, because for CVI, it's not about the fact that that child can see small print, it's the amount the brain can process. And I wrote an article on CVI Scotland on this, on how to assess print for processing. Key is spacing. If a child has simultanagnosia, in that they only see small amounts of information, they may not want things too big, but they can't cope with lots of clutter. Early reading books, again, shock horror, because obviously pictures are used for clues and things. For a child with CVI, that can be a distractor, or they simply memorise the simple pictures, but they're not actually reading. So you need to be aware of that. But I will put the link in, because I am going to send on some information to you with a link to the CVI Scotland piece that I wrote. Smart boards, lots of icons. Are they oh, someone's put something in there, I'll have a look after, sorry. Icons, films are used much more in schools now. Some of you may have children who like to watch things on repeat. They may want to watch what appear to be childish programs that, you know, they're all too old for. This is often because when you talk to them, they can pick up what's going on, because things which move too quickly or are too fast, they don't have time to process. So they'll watch things and they'll watch them again, and they'll watch them again to get the information. Now you can imagine in school, we're talking about maybe pre-teaching and post-teaching to check in with that child. Touch typing and technology. Technology, many of the things that are used that are standard for children with an ocular vision impairment will not necessarily work for someone with CVI. Again, it needs to be individualised. There are quite a few that aren't too good on some of the text-to-speech software. You know, so you really need to be looking at that. And if you're QTVI, even for families where you're looking at things, it needs to be assessed for your child. And I can give further advice on that at some point. Touch typing. The amount of children that people will just shove on a course and think that they can learn to type, you need to assess their fine motor skills. Even the people who appear not to have any difficulties, often when the push comes to shove, you can find that they can't use their fingers on the keyboard. They may need OT programs, fine motor skills. It always has to be, I would never put a child on a typing course until I've checked their fingers. Typing needs to be touch typing as you would for someone with a severe vision impairment. No looking at keyboards. I use sleep shades. They don't do it in class generally. Or for a child who doesn't want the sleep shade, you need a box to cover it, because that keyboard is visual clutter. And posture, they need to be looking forward, not bending over. Otherwise, you're going to get neck issues. So you may need OT input. Thinking about sports. Quite a lot of children with CVI, I know, in theory, have got good vision, love things like goalball because they're on a level playing field. You know, it is, and often some will prefer individual sports. Team games are really, really hard for them because they can't see the ball, they can't keep up. And as they get older, that's got an impact on their social life because people don't want them on their teams sometimes. Teaching methods. We're looking at chunking, consistent repetition, and tactile learning. Repetition, someone had asked about building pathways. Things need to be consistent. You cannot have someone doing something one way and someone else doing it another, because that is asking the brain to mentally multitask. You find the way that works for the child and you stick with it. And everybody, I will admit to being a control freak with some of the children I've worked on like that. With these issues, we all worked in the same way. Nothing was changed. If it worked, you know, you might think something's boring, but it's not necessarily to that child. It's the way their brain needs to learn. I feel very guilty because I've had very little time to talk about colour tents, and I've got 2 minutes and still not finished, but I've put some links in for children with very complex needs. There's lots on our website. One of our trustees is an amazing woman who worked for Scope for many years. These children, if we're talking about freeing up the brain's capacity, we are working very slowly with familiar singular objects. I will send things on in my slides. Anybody wants to contact me to discuss further, please feel free if there's anything you don't understand, but some of them are fairly self-explanatory. Sorry. I just want to think now about the social emotional impact before I finish for you, and I will apologise, it's been a rush, but it's a huge subject. Lack of diagnosis for some of you. I know some parents are desperate to find someone who's going to diagnose your child or understand it, you know, or a child who's late diagnosed, feeling of uselessness if they don't know why, if they haven't had a diagnosis and they don't know why it's difficult for them, the impact on their learning. How can you learn if something's not visible to you? Your ability to take part in sports. All this leads to behaviour issues. When people say, oh, I don't understand, you know, why have they got behaviour issues? Well, I think I would have behaviour issues if I was living in a world where nobody really understood how challenging it could be for me. Frustration for those with good vision, it being discounted, they're not believed. They don't understand why people see differently. Not being able to find your friends, seeing people in groups. This causes huge issues for many of these children. congenital, it's all they know. If acquired, you're going to have different struggles potentially with it. Remember, children may not be able to verbalize their feelings. Think about children who have no verbal language. One thing I would add is, because I think this is important, most of the communication, because someone had asked a question about this, that's used, apart from on-body signing, which is, and again, that needs to be consistent, most of the visuals that are used for children with complex disabilities are not accessible. I'm quite happy to say that. Even Makaton has to be done slowly, because if those hands are moving too quickly for children who use Makaton or in a group, they may not see it. Mobility, hugely important. It's keeping these children safe, independent living skills. And I know mobility officers are like hen's teeth, but it is very, very important. Training for mental health professionals, and many of these children get referred to, and they don't understand, they've never heard of it. And so again, someone can be sent to, down the wrong route. It is really important we get this understanding of cerebral visual impairment out there, even the very basics. So take home messages. Apologies, I'm 2 minutes over, but we finished, and I apologize hugely for the rush. Start from the child, never top down. If that child can't perceive it, if it's not visible to them, it's not there, they can't learn from it or appreciate it. And the world is a scary place if you don't make it more accessible by clearing the clutter and actually thinking about how that child sees. Think about what I've talked about, act upon it. Hopefully some of you will have taken away something new. Have high expectations. Given the chance, these children will surprise you if you give them the opportunity. And key is to remember the impact of neurofatigue and functional reserve. They don't top up like we do. So they need lots of rest breaks. And don't forget my last sentence, there are many out there. They just haven't been identified and diagnosed yet. And we need you to help find them so that they can have as happy a life as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. That was brilliant. As ever, so much to say. I think we're going to hand over now quickly to Steffi. So Steffi, if you want to unmute, that would be great.
I am unmuted and I am just going to share my screen. So I'm using the age-old presentation, just helps me to orient myself. Okay, so I am going to talk about my experience of working with children with CVI in education. Why is it not changing? So as with any challenges that children face and any conditions or diagnoses that they have, there's going to be an impact on their education. And Janet has talked about that probably more extensively than I ever could, because she's definitely the expert in that area. But for me, the one thing I really want to flag in this short bit of time is the impact on their mental health. There's been a small bit of research that's been done, and that has been flagged that the prevalence of mental health difficulties is quite high in this population of children. And anecdotally, in my clinical practice, there is quite a high level of mental health difficulties in pretty much all the children I've seen with CVI, quite a lot of anxiety. It impacts their sense of belonging in school, their sense of belonging in the world. And as Janet already mentioned, with children who have good acuity, there tends to be an increased mental health difficulty. And, my hypothesis around this, right or wrong, is in part because I think people struggle to understand what's going on. And I know Suzanne also kind of mentioned, that there's such a lack of knowledge about CVI. I think when you're working with children who have good vision, then it's like, well, they can see, so what's the issue? I'm fine. And another part of it, I think, is also because of their good visual acuity, they are able to see the world more clearly, so they're more susceptible to the visual clutter. And as Janet already said, we live in a very cluttered world, and schools are very cluttered places. So this makes the world exceptionally overwhelming for this group of children. And I'm going to use one of the oldest psychological theories to kind of understand and explain this. Just Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which talks about how we need our basic needs to be met before we can begin to grow and develop. And for these children, people, young people, even adults, the basic need of feeling safe and secure isn't met. They're in a world, they're in a school, sometimes in a house, until you properly understand their needs and are able to adapt their environment, where they don't feel safe, where they don't feel secure, where they don't feel they belong, and everything is overwhelming and scary. So those lower needs are not being met. And so they're not able to feel safe and secure in their school and connected, and they don't have trust in the adults that are around them, which unsurprisingly leads to anxiety and other mental health difficulties. And obviously then they're unable to engage in learning and to be able to really achieve within their potential. And, as I mentioned already, there's a lack of understanding of CVI. So in my experience, and having worked with many professionals, those who understand it and those who don't around children, it usually doesn't come from a place of malice, that they're not wanting to accommodate or adapt for these young people, but rather it's what I tend to call unconscious competence. So when we're thinking about learning, we kind of go through these different phases, and when we're in the unconscious incompetence phase, we don't know what we don't know. So there's no motivation to learn, there's no desire to learn this information or seeing a need to learn it, because we don't know this information. When we can begin to learn is when we're in the conscious incompetence phase, where you can see what you don't know, and then there's there's a gap to fill. And in my experience, and again, not from a place of malice, this is not as a judgment, but I feel that sometimes the right accommodations in schools particularly are not in place, because the people around the young person are in this state of unconscious competence, because CVI is a really complex condition and it's really difficult to understand. And I think even, especially for professionals who have been working in fields for a very, very, very long time, such as teachers, educators, medical professionals, it takes a lot of courage to realize that, there may be something that you don't know, and that you need to develop this knowledge in this area. And also with CVI, sorry, I was jumping ahead. So the truth is that actually, in my view, it's the parents who are the experts. And as Janet said, no two children I've worked with CVI are the same. So there isn't a one size fits all, do this intervention, here you go, try it, we're gonna, this is the answer. But rather it's about really understanding and unpicking all the complexities of each unique child. And usually there isn't just CVI. There's usually a complex profile of need that needs to be properly understood. And for most of the children I work with who have a range of, differences and difficulties and challenges, I recommend multidisciplinary working. But for children with CVI, I insist on it. Most importantly, because through the multidisciplinary working of the children with CVI, I have learned so much, but also there's a lot of trial and error. So I think, you as parents have done a lot and have tried a lot of different things over the years, over their development, right from when they were tiny tots. So you already have a baseline of what works and doesn't work. And so rather than us, trying it all over again, you give us a place from where to start. But it's also, and the other professionals from all the different disciplines are coming at everything from all different angles. So they as well have tried many, many different things. But I think the really important thing is that all the professionals working have at least some understanding of CVI and have the conscious incompetence, to use that framework from before, to develop a further understanding of what they don't know. And, more than the children being the experts, your child is the expert. They need to educate us. They need to educate us as professionals. They need to educate the teachers around them. They need to educate society, and it's a tough job for them. And they need to do it in any way they know how. Some children are really eloquent and able to do this really clearly. Others do it through their behavior, showing when they're overwhelmed, showing when they can't cope. But we need to listen and we need to believe what they say. And actually, you as parents need to also do that. And I know that I've got many parents who, when in the education system, doubt themselves a lot because of the pressure that society and the education system put on them. But I always find that parents deep in their gut know what's right for their child, and they do believe their child, and they're trying to. So I guess letting your child know that you believe their experience and you believe what they're going through helps them to develop trust in themselves, which then allows them to self-advocate. And that self-advocacy, in my experience, is absolutely paramount. And I've worked with a couple of kids in particular who are brilliant at it. And it teaches everyone so much. And more importantly, it helps them so much. One, build a world around them that works for them, but also develop their insight of what works and doesn't work for them. And back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, by them having that belief in themselves, by them having that trust in you as parents and educators and professionals, we are helping to build that sense of security and safety in them, which will hopefully help to mitigate and build some resiliency factors against mental health difficulties that could potentially be there. But the other really complex thing is that CVI is, in my experience so far, and maybe Dan can contradict me on this, it's never an isolated issue. There are usually many other challenges that are going on for this young person. It typically also exists in the context of a brain injury, as well as other diagnoses. And this is why the importance of multidisciplinary working is so important, because we need to be able to understand everything that is going on for this young person and what works and doesn't. So, for example, if they've got CVI and autism, if you're leading with the autism as the primary diagnosis, then typically lots of visual strategies would be used. And there's a lack of understanding of, CVI, and they've got good visual acuity. It's like, why aren't these visuals working? Because actually those visuals may be overly cluttered, and they may not be very clear for young people with CVI. So obviously knowledge of CVI is going to be of paramount importance, and that's why Janet mentioned, and I would agree, and I mentioned it later on, that having CVI as the overarching primary need is essential, because that guides the interventions that we put in place. Apologies if I'm talking a bit fast, but I'm conscious of time. So then we're thinking about assessment, and I'm going to talk a bit about what to expect, I guess, from an EP or a neuropsychological assessment. And obviously there can be controversies around doing standardized assessments with young people who are following a very atypical developmental trajectory. However, for me, it's important that any professional who does any assessment understands CVI, and also understands their conscious incompetence, understands what they don't know about this child, about CVI, and is willing to learn in the process. Why do standardized assessments within this population of children? Isn't it going to disadvantage them? Well, for me, the important thing is first to understand how to approach the assessment. And I've always been guided by the young people and their families. Quite often I find that it's working in short bursts with little breaks that really help. And breaks such as using eye shades, having other form of movement breaks, sensory breaks, just to keep going. The parents are also very good at guiding when something is too visually cluttered and when it isn't, so as to know when to give them more of a break after they've done something, and when we can continue going. They're also very good at seeing the signs of fatigue and so on. And that's almost more important. However, how I approach the assessment with young people with CVI is actually more important than the differentiation of the assessment tools. But then even more important is thinking of the interpretation. So you know, when you're interpreting the findings, if it doesn't fit with all the other pieces of information that you've collected, you know that there's been a barrier there that has been caused by the CVI. If, for example, you're doing non-verbal assessment and you've been doing some visuals, and on some of the tasks they've done, some of the items they've done well, but others which are actually technically easier, they haven't done well, then you're thinking about the visual clutter on the page and what may have impacted that. So when you're interpreting the findings, it's really important to use that knowledge of CVI and of that young person, all the information you've collected from all those people around them. And then obviously it comes to navigating schools or navigating the education system more generally, which can be very daunting and very scary and very exhausting. And you know, my advice is you're going to find lots of people there with unconscious incompetence who are not at a place where they're ready to learn how to support, but there are always people who care and who really want to learn. And identifying those people who want to learn from your child and who want to learn from you and building that team around your child can be a massive resiliency factor, both for you as a parent, but also for your child's progress and future. From more of a logistical point of view, thinking about what's listed in the SEN Code of Practice as the plan, do, review. So, you know, where you have regular multidisciplinary team meetings where targets are set with interventions that match those targets and they're reviewed regularly. This is really important, one, for monitoring your child's progress and ensuring that they make small steps of steady progress in line with their developmental trajectory. But also, if you're considering an education, health and care plan, this is really useful evidence to collect the build up to an EHCP, because you've got a really clear history of the intervention that has gone in place to support your child. And as I said before, if you feel your child needs more support, go for it. CVI is very misunderstood. It's usually not, it's very misunderstood, and the level of provision needed isn't often understood. So if you feel they need more support, unfortunately, you're probably going to have to fight for it, and you're probably going to have to advocate for them, because, as Janet said, they don't know that they're finding the world much more difficult than typically the developing peers. So part of the journey of being a parent with CVI, and you know, hopefully as professionals and educators too, is advocating for these young people. And if you're unsure, just there are quite a few parent advocacy agencies and organizations now that should be able to signpost you and guide you as to what your child should be required, would be able to be provided with. And just on the HCP, you will receive these slides. This is quite a dense slide, but I thought I'd just put it in there. What do you need? It's clear evidence of need. And this is the key thing. And what is required to meet that need? So thinking of the plan, the review cycles of before, that's why those are important, because they clearly identify your child's needs and the interventions in line with that. So I'm aware I have 1 minute, so I will speed it up a little bit. And these are not my words, but they're the words out there. So this is not in line with what I think, but it's the reality of the situation. It's what is required to make adequate progress. And if they require what is above quality first teaching, I'm sure if you've been in the EHCP process, you've heard those few words way too many times. And you need evidence to prove that that is what they need. So you need professional evidence, you need school reports, LA professional reports, NHS reports, and probably even independent professional reports. And they all just need to evidence the need and the type of provision that is required for your child. And again, this is not mine. This is not what they need in an ideal scenario. This is what they need to be able to make some form of progress, because you know, this is a shared pot of money divided amongst many children, but that doesn't mean you don't ask for the support. Your child is entitled to it if they're not making adequate progress with the provision that's available in mainstream education. But my one piece of advice is be clear of your child's needs and what they require. I think most of all, for me, the biggest thing is just parents believing that they can do it. You can get your child support they need. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it can be overwhelming and tiring, and you'll feel sometimes that there's no point to it. But you will be able to find those professionals that care. They are out there, and they're up, and you will be able to get them the provision that they do need.
Thank you so much, Steffi, and to Janet too, for that wonderful insight into the world of CVI. As both speakers have said, it's a whistle-stop tour this evening, and there is so much to say. There will be resources afterwards, and fortunately, both Janet and Steffi are providing their contact details should you wish to contact them directly. So now to move on to some of the real life stories to share with you. And I'm going to start with mine and our journey as a family with our son, Zach, who is 15. So Zach is one of my twins, and I also have an older daughter who's about to turn 21. I'll start by giving you a bit of a rundown of Zach's challenges. In common with many CVI stories, it's often not all about one challenge, but many interconnecting factors. Zach has a rare genetic disorder that you may not have heard of called Bosch-Boonstra-Scharf optic atrophy syndrome. It's taken me quite a long time to be able to say that without stumbling over my words. But it causes developmental delay, cortical vision loss, optic nerve atrophy, and autism spectrum disorder. In some cases, it can cause epilepsy too, but fortunately in our case, it hasn't. Zach was diagnosed with this in February 2020, following our participation in the 100,000 Genomes project that was championed by Great Ormond Street Research and Development Team. And it was really good to find out the root cause of Zach's disabilities. But by 2020, we were aware of most of the individual challenges described for Zach after many years of pursuing answers to our son's obvious difficulties. So for Zach, it took until he was 13 to fully understand what was going on. And I'll give you a quick rundown of what's documented about Zach. He's registered severely sight impaired. He has cerebral vision impairments. He has significantly reduced visual acuity. He has severely depressed visual fields and central vision loss. He has no depth perception or 3D vision, and he's photophobic. He also has a latent horizontal nystagmus. He's diagnosed with ASD on the high functioning end. He has developmental coordination disorder and really significant difficulties with sequencing movement. And he has some moderate learning difficulties, including dyslexia. So that's quite a list. And our journey to properly understand our son's challenges has been quite a long one. It's way too long to squeeze into a 10-15 minute capsule tonight. So I'm just going to focus on our journey to diagnosis and what we've learned along the way. I do have some practical tips as well, but I think probably you'll have heard enough after my main story. So I'll provide those with all the other resources after the event tonight. So birth to starting school. My twins were born at 36 weeks by cesarean. There were no issues on delivery and no immediate health concerns. However, Zach didn't meet any normal milestones. He didn't smile for months and months. He couldn't follow my finger with his eyes. He didn't reach for things. He couldn't roll over. He couldn't lie on his tummy or lift his head. And he would cry constantly. He was a really clingy child and very unsettled, particularly outside the home environment. When he made it onto his feet at around 2, he couldn't run. He tripped and fell constantly. He bumped into door frames, and he favoured just sitting, mostly on me, or sleeping. And he would writhe around seeking sort of physical feedback constantly. He was very stuck in exploratory play for many, many years. So no imaginative play or interaction really with other children. And sadly, I think our community paediatric team just seemed a little bit out of their depth, and we bounced around a fair bit between different teams in different hospitals, and it was a really confusing time. During that time, Zach was given glasses at the age of 2, but we were told this was just a first line of defence to address what appeared to be a reduction in visual acuity, and he was very young and unable to respond to testing in a clinical environment. So obviously we knew no different at that time. He started school then with his twin sister in a mainstream lower school, and an EHCP was put in place for him immediately, and he was given one-to-one support. He couldn't engage in learning without a really high level of TA input. We had a QTVI from the get-go, and she visited terminally. Zach was introduced to touch typing really quickly. That was a slow process, and other than that, materials were enlarged onto A3 for him as a sort of standard response to his VI needs. And again, at that time, we didn't really know any different, but Zach was exhausted all the time. He had no friends, he didn't play with other children or to run around, he wouldn't engage in the playground. And he just really seemed like a child sitting on the sidelines of life. And his only dialogue really was with adults. So when Zach was 5, we asked to be transferred to Moorfields in London to explore Zach's visual challenges in a bit more detail, and hopefully to access a paediatric consultant who shares her time between Great Ormond Street and Moorfields. And that for us was a really pivotal time, just being able to connect with experts who had an understanding of what might be going on for our son. And over the following couple of years, there were lots of hospital visits, accessing ophthalmology, the developmental vision clinic and neurology at Great Ormond Street, alongside the low vision team at Moorfields in London. And following an MRI, Zach was given his CVI diagnosis during that period, alongside DCD, which is developmental coordination disorder. And we obviously already knew that Zach had reduced visual acuity alongside these things. And this sort of culminated at that point in time in him being registered partially sighted. But remember that point, because I'll come back to that a little bit later. But things were not adding up for us still, and Great Ormond Street continued to assess Zach and probe a bit deeper. ASD was added to his diagnosis when he was 9 by the developmental vision clinic at Gosh. And then following that, we had the resulting Bosch-Boonstra-Scharf umbrella. But as Zach went through school, things just got more and more challenging for him as the learning speed got quicker and the work more complex. And on the surface, it was easier to assume that he just wasn't cognitively able. And then COVID landed when Zach was 11, and time stopped for all of us. We were all thrust into roles as teachers in our homes. And those were really challenging times, but equally, they were incredibly enlightening for us, because we were able to see firsthand the difficulties that Zach had across all areas of accessing his education, from the format of documents, both in print and digitally, and the constant pressure on his brain to parallel process instructions all the time. And as much as professionals see and advise on a framework to support in education, the reality for a child like Zach with CVI in a learning setting is it's really brutal. For Zach, the fatigue was crippling, and actually existing in a standard learning environment with constant noise and distraction, visual clutter everywhere, the need to tune into learning, expecting his brain to process text and discussion, retain that information, let alone recall it, that's just incredibly hard on a young person with CVI, and it was really hard on Zach. Learning to read up until that point had been a real labour of love. We'd been plugging away with the Biff and Chip and the Oxford Reading Tree, and actually COVID gifted me the time to dedicate to Zach's reading skills. We applied for a grant to help pay for a special magnifier, and away we went. And in those first months of COVID, being at home 24/7 with Zach, he went from a reading age of just over 7 to a reading age of 11 going on 12, which was brilliant. He flatly refused any more Biff and Chip. And we read all sorts of things, either digitally, or at the time it was things like Diary of the Wimpy Kid or David Walliams, but always incredibly slowly, with discussion and humour, and often backed up with YouTube clips or any association I could find with the theme of the content of the book. So we went for quality, not quantity. And gradually words on paper started to make much more sense to him. And at the same time, we explored language verbally. I would do impressions of the same phrases or take on an alter ego, we explored social language, and he had no idea I was trying to embed a deeper understanding of language generally. Now he's the king of old-fashioned phrases, and his formal writing is actually very good. So COVID wasn't all bad for us. It gifted us some stuff. So generally within the mainstream environment, school support for Zach, other than the basic enlargement, would focus on ASD strategies somewhat because of that dual diagnosis for Zach. And these, of course, are mostly visual, and I think Steffi mentioned that. Visual timetables and strategies for learning, all of which added to his fatigue. He slept after school for hours and hours, and you could see him withdrawing from everything and everybody. At school, he massively masked. He was a really compliant child with a one-to-one, and he just stayed under the radar all day, trying his best, feeling shattered all the time until he could come home, sleep, eat, and repeat. And that was his life for a long time. He's a really bright young man, but it is incredibly difficult for him to process information. If he has to process sound and vision at the same time, that's especially challenging for his brain to cope with. And often he's then only absorbing part of what is being expected of him. He'll miss key instructions or not embed the learning and then not be able to get on task. So, Zach is cognitively able to understand and learn at quite a high level, but delivering learning materials carefully and breaking them down as simplistically as possible is key to success for him. So for Zach, in a mainstream learning environment, put quite simply, a class of 30 with lots of noise, distraction and visual clutter made learning and making positive progress really challenging, and ultimately impossible for him as the learning pace stepped up, especially through Key Stage 3. So at 13, he was actually still just about hanging on by his fingernails to age expected learning in some subjects, but things were heading in the wrong direction and he was starting to disengage, and it was all just getting too much, really. More recently, Zach's told me that he can get very frustrated with his brain. He wants to learn, but his brain fatigues very quickly and he has to pace himself. Telltale signs in class are yawning, slouching in his chair, turning his head away from the direction of an instruction, and just generally disengaging. He's learning to pace himself much better these days, but fatigue can still be a big barrier to learning for him. Teaching staff would also comment that Zach would turn his head away from them when they spoke to him, and they would associate this with ASD behaviours around eye contact. And I think this is something that I think Janet mentioned, because in actual fact for Zach, he does this to remove visual noise from a situation when he's feeling a bit overwhelmed or tired. If he's only using his auditory senses, it makes it easier for him to take in information. And we've found that some professionals who might not have that deeper understanding of CVI will be really quick to attach an ASD behaviour without thinking through that bigger picture and seeing it as a trigger to simplify the task a bit more or take a break from the learning environment. But so coming back to Zach's mobility and general engagement outside of school, at 12 going on 13, Zach was still clinging onto my hand for dear life when we left the house. He hated busy, crowded spaces. He would jump a mile at sudden noises. He hated the dark and in particular street lights. He didn't want to join in with anything out of the house. He couldn't ride a bike or engage in sport. And he couldn't game like other children of his age. And holidays were restricted to us going to the same place every year on the south coast in an environment he was very familiar with, and that was just easier for us as a family. But as a family, we would go in two different directions. One would stay home or in a quiet space with Zach, and everybody else would go off and do something a bit more exciting. And sadly, I think his mental health really started to decline at that point. As Steffi said, it's really quite debilitating mentally for a child, and anxiety and fear started to take over. And this was a really scary time for us. And this is where it gets quite interesting, because remember at that point, we thought Zach was partially sighted. And quite by luck, we were signposted to Janet Harwood at the CVI Society. and I arranged to speak to Janet about Zach. And I would learn more about my son in that first conversation than I'd learned in 13 years. And during that conversation, Janet said, and what was Zach's last field test like? And I said, field test, oh gosh, a while ago, they did the finger test thing at Moorfields, and the phone went really quiet, and she explained to me the importance of a machine field test, and that hadn't been explained to me, despite being, in an environment where that really should be known. So I got that field test, and guess what? For 13 years, my lovely young man had been trying to navigate life with no peripheral vision and very little central vision, on top of all the things we already knew. And no one other than Janet, who hadn't even met Zach at that point, had joined all those dots together and thought, the way this child is presenting sounds like their fields aren't good at all. And Janet was the only one not surprised by this turn of events for us. And sadly, she's witnessed this, I think, on other occasions. So Zach's sight registration was immediately changed to severely sight impaired at that point. Only then did we really start to understand Zach's full challenges, and we've been on catch up ever since that point. We introduced a blind cane at 13, and that was really tough to do. But actually, he really has tried to embrace it, and it's almost like his best friend when he's out and about. We introduced Braille at 13, again, tough for a child to take on board later in their journey. Zach was sadly out of school for a while when things got really bumpy for him mentally. And we realised that mainstream school wasn't going to work for Zach. This was a sad time, but also a time when I was able to work with him myself, knowing all of his challenges, and to start to rebuild his mental health. So for me, if I was to sum up the main barriers for Zach, they would be fatigue, absolutely crippling fatigue, and fear, anxiety. And none of us actually like those feelings, if they come across us, and you generally have it for something, in an immediate sense, but it's really commonplace for a child with CVI every single day. But the good news is that my brave and very resilient young man is now on the road to happier times. He is now a long cane user, although it's a challenge. He has significant difficulty sweeping a cane, but we're working on that. He needs a parent carer with him all the time, out of a known environment like home. He's now learning Braille, and just a year after starting, he's approaching the dizzy heights of contracted Braille. So we hope that that will really help him with his visual fatigue in education. He is accessing a full education in a school setting and studying for his GCSEs next year, planning his A-levels and beyond, which is wonderful. And he does now have friends, and he's progressing really well socially. So things are really looking up for Zach. It most definitely hasn't been an easy journey for us. And there's lots of things that I've learned along the way. But as I said, you've probably heard enough from me now. I have a little one-pager that I will make available after this evening. So I'm sorry Zach's not here tonight. I didn't mean to say that at the beginning. He lives away term time. And I did invite him, but he decided not to join us because that's quite challenging for him. But thanks for listening to my story. I'm now going to move on to let you hear from a wonderful young ambassador for the CVI Society, Rebecca Hardy-Bishop. Rebecca is 23 years old, and she lives in the Jersey Channel Islands with her family. Rebecca currently trains and competes in swimming in the UK full-time. She's currently waiting to gain international classification to compete overseas, and she is an absolute inspiration. Unfortunately, she can't be with us tonight as swimming has hijacked her, but she's made a short recording that I'm going to ask Jane to play now, if that's okay.
Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I'm sorry I couldn't be with you guys in person today. I'd have really liked to have been doing this live, but swimming has got in the way. So I've done a pre-recording, but I'll give you some contact details at the end in case you want to ask me any questions about what I've talked about today. My experience of growing up with undiagnosed CVI has a few standout features. I was told I was really very clumsy and always moved my head a lot. I started wearing glasses when I was around the age of 8. Moving to secondary school was difficult as I spent most of the time getting lost and falling upstairs at first. Lots of them, as the school was built on a hill. When I was 16, I had a visual field test done at the optician's, as I might have been getting a moped. And that's when we found out something was wrong and not quite right with my vision. I had very limited peripheral field. At about the same time, my school flagged up via broad spectrum testing that I possibly have autism, and I was diagnosed with higher functioning autism. So I got extra time in exams, different coloured paper. In hindsight, we now know I don't have autism. The behaviours were a result of my CVI. At school, I continued on to do my A-levels and then moved on to higher education. During school, I definitely had teachers who were supportive, but we didn't know at this point I had CVI, so that some of the support probably wasn't targeted in the right area, but they definitely helped me make sure I could get some sort of education. So, you may be wondering when I got diagnosed. Between 2016 and 2020, we had been referred to our local hospital, but to cut a long story short, they did not really listen to my family at all or take any notice of my birth history, as I had quite a traumatic oxygen-starved start in life. And as a result of my autism diagnosis, they said it was all in my head. However, my family has always believed it is not in my head, and there was a medical reason for my vision loss, and autism didn't really fit, as I had some of the traits, but not many of them. My GP did try, but could not get anywhere, and we were left with a feeling of helplessness and frustration. So I just threw myself into my sport as much as I possibly could, and that was the constant thing outside of my family which never judged me and allowed me to just be me. In January 2021, I went for a routine eye test and saw a new optometrist who asked lots and lots of questions and then said, "I think you might have cerebral visual impairment," which we had never heard of. We were put in touch with the CVI Society and it went from there, and everything started to fall into place and explained why I saw, acted and lived the way I was. After meeting Janet Harwood, she put us in touch with Professor Dutton and Dr. Jones, and it was arranged to have a functional MRI scan, which took hours to do, but found out I had damage to the left side of my brain, and we finally got my diagnosis of CVI, plus some other things which go along with my version of CVI. So at the age of 22, I finally got my certificate of vision impairment, which states I'm severely sight impaired. This was where my autism diagnosis got questioned, and also due to the process of the diagnosis of CVI, it came to light I should also go and get assessed for cerebral palsy. So I also got my diagnosis of right-sided hemidystonia cerebral palsy. I think the biggest barriers I found in life with CVI, or hurdles to get over, is people knowing and understanding about the condition. ICANN, the local Jersey eyesight charity, don't have knowledge of anyone else on the island. The Jersey Eye Department claim to not know anything about it. Even when using my cane and walking around, because my eyes look normal with my glasses, I do get some odd reactions. It's quite different when my glasses are dark. The drawback of my cane is it causes a lot of repetitive strain injuries to my shoulders, so to get past that, I quite often just hold onto the elbow of my friends or parents whenever we're going places. I can do the majority of things someone my age can do, just with a few modifications. So I have to plan what I'm doing, and I have to remind myself when I go out that people are not going to realise I can't see. CVI is in my brain, so I have to make sure you always think and know where things are. So I try and find a map or a virtual tour of where I am going, because then I can memorise it, and especially if I'm going somewhere completely new. I struggle with finding people in crowds and stuff around the house, so I use air tags and make sure I'm sharing my location with the people I'm trying to find or I'm with. Or a non-tech solution which my parents employ quite a lot is wearing plain coloured clothes, so I find it easier to find them but also focus on them, as I find patterned clothes difficult to focus on in a scene. The last thing I'm going to talk about is having a focus, a constant in your life. So for me, it was my sport of swimming. I started swimming when I was 5 and competitively when I was 11, going 3 times a week to train and loving it. The coach would write sessions on the whiteboard which I could not see, so I got very good at memorising the sessions, which were read out at the start of each of the sessions. And at first was taught technique, standing with the coach, standing on poolside, which I couldn't see. So I sort of learnt by hearing and by guessing, and my teammates helping me a bit. Now, as I've got older and I moved to a different swim club, my coach is having the lovely job of reteaching me the correct technique. I am classified S12 for swimming, a process for which was all started with British Blind Sport. And my one word of advice is make sure you read all the guidance notes and follow the process exactly to a T. There are 3 different classes for visually impaired in sport: S11B1, S12B2 and S13B3. I use a tapper in competitions, which is a really long pole with a soft tennis ball covered by a balloon on the end. And I get tapped on the head when I get to a wall, so I know when to turn, and it's made such a difference to my swimming. I still can't swim in a straight line very well, but at least now I can turn and avoid the wall. Swimming is one of the only times where I feel just like everyone else, with the only difference being when we're training, I will almost always have a headset on, and I'm connected to my coach for 3 hours every session, every day, where he gets to tell me when to turn, what we're doing, and everything else. They have become such a success that the club now uses them, the headsets, across the pool, so I'm not the only one wearing one, but it started with me. If you're looking at headsets, they're called Duke's headsets. They are a small business based in the north of England. The junior ones are by far the easiest ones to use, and they're the smallest as well. They do adult ones, but we found the junior ones fit better. Overall, trying to stay positive when going through the diagnosis process, and for me, having my sport as a focus when things are not going to plan or seeming hopeless helped enormously. There's always a fix to the problem. For example, in swimming, especially when I was younger, before I had a headset or a tapper, I used a pool noodle, which my parents held on poolside and dragged across the water, which helped me to learn to swim, sort of in a straight line, as I would try to follow it to the best of my ability. Before I go, I want to thank Suzanne for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about what my life is like with CVI and the trials and positive moments which go along with it. The best way to contact me is through my Instagram. With my Instagram handle is @RebeccaHardyBishop.
That was wonderful. And Rebecca is just such an inspiration. She's spoken at Janet's CVI conference before, and I always find when she speaks, it's just so inspiring to hear how she's managed to overcome so much. So we're going to move on to our last speaker for tonight, which is the lovely Art, who is also a young ambassador for the CVI Society. Over to you, Art.
Okay, so hi everybody, sorry to bring the PowerPoint up full screen. My name is Art Oakes. I'm based in Ireland, as you see on the PowerPoint, in the south. So basically Ireland's split into 2 sides, Republic and the north. The north has 6 counties, the Republic has the rest. So I'm based in a small area in County Wicklow. So we are basically kind of 45 minutes from our city centre. So what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is basically my journey, my barriers, and how I eventually got diagnosed to where I am today. So to start with, the logos on the screen, as you can see, if you can't read them, the first one says St Andrews National School, Bray. That was my primary school. Newcourt School was my last 2 years of primary school and my full amount of secondary school. The National Learning Network is a level 3, is a 3rd level education institute in Ireland, and then the very last one is University College Dublin, and that's where I'm studying. And throughout this PowerPoint, you'll see these logos come up, and basically the slides those logos relate to them, my time and struggles that I've had throughout. So to start with my first one, the question is, why was it so difficult to get diagnosed with CVI in Ireland for me? Getting diagnosed was so difficult as no one would believe my mum when my mum asked for a referral to an ophthalmologist in Glasgow called Professor Gordon Dutton from my ophthalmologist in Crumlin Children's Hospital, who refused even after my mum handing him a leaflet that she had picked up in Enable Ireland Services for Young People in Ireland. So that's basically like anywhere in the UK that basically help people with disabilities. My mum didn't take no as an answer, and she contacted my neurologist in Crumlin, who referred me straight away. When I finally got over to see Gordon Dutton, my mum felt like he was living with us, as she was finally being heard and listened to. So then when we got to the hospital in the morning of the appointment, I had a meltdown because my mum refused to buy me sugar at 9 a.m. in the morning. And she thought, what do I do now? As we had finally got to see the doctor who could diagnose me, and my mum rang my dad, and in those days it was expensive, and then suddenly a man walked out of the hospital towards my mum, who had tears in her eyes, and introduced himself as Professor Gordon Dutton, and sat beside my mum and said, "This is normal for a child with CVI, and we will wait here till I calm down, till he calms down." Oh, sorry, I'll stay on that one for a minute. We found out, so part of it getting diagnosed is that we also found out that my eye doctor in Crumlin was Gordon Dutton's registrar for 2 years, and after a very long appointment, he was able to confirm that yes, I had CVI and all the behaviour I was doing was classic CVI. When we returned to Ireland armed with a report, my mum brought it to the team in Enable Ireland and my school, but still no one believed my mum. And after asking that, we got a referral to the West of England school, where we were there, had a week of testing. That week of testing came back with a 46-page report. And after the Enable Ireland and my team Enable Ireland and my team in school, and also St. Joseph's, which is now called Child Vision, their jaws dropped because they hadn't realized how bad it was. The St. Joseph's weren't really believing my mum either. And as we struggled, we just eventually got there with the diagnosis. So now what I'm going to talk to you about is my primary school. So after hitting what we describe as a milestone, my mum still persisted and we wouldn't take no as an answer. She got me referred, so my mum so this is when I was firstly going to school. So he had all the reports, all the stuff referred, and then the Department of Education were refusing to hand over or to give us a visiting teacher. So after years of fighting, and after promises by the previous head of this Department of Education said, "Yeah, I promise you before I retire, you'll have a visiting teacher on your doorstep." He retired, he went off, and nothing ever happened. So my mum had to threaten to sue the education board to get the help I needed, as no one was willing to help us. And the head of the department said he would help, but he didn't. So after my mum's threat, there was a visually impaired teacher on our doorstep 48 hours later, and it was the worst case of neglect she'd ever seen in her career. She ordered 2,000 euros worth of assistive technology for me. So in the Irish education system, they can't move technology with the person who needs it, as once assigned to one place can't be moved with the person, which we thought was pathetic because this was 2,500 euros worth of technology, from software to specialized keyboards to the laptop, and all of it had to stay in the primary school due to the fact that it had its name and it couldn't just move up with me. So then I'll move on to so when I moved into third level education, so when I started third level education, I had a battle getting my disabilities recognized by the staff. So I had a tutor in the first college of this place. So I was in two different colleges, two different places for this college, where I did several levels of different education. So I did 3, 4, and 5. Basically in the first place, I had one tutor who would shout at us, and the other tutor who would listen to me but wouldn't do anything about it. And then I had the head of the college turn around to me and tell me that basically I was making it up, that I had the CVI stuff, all this report stuff was just crap, and why should we believe it, even though it had the West of England school, Gordon Dutton's signature, everything, it had the works, and they still wouldn't do it. So I had to move on to another college. So when I moved, so yeah, so when I started, oh yeah, so when I moved to the second place, I walked away from that place, the bigger one, which is called Roslin College. It was basically the daddy of all the other colleges. So all the other colleges, including the one in Bray I was in, are satellite centres, and then Roslin College was the main one. So after 7 years, I walked away with a major award in level 3, 4, and 5, finishing up with a first class honours in level 4 and 5. These levels are, or those levels are lower and higher leaving cert, or the UK equivalent A levels, which is like we do leaving cert here in Ireland. So normally you normally go through a system called CAO where you use your points, but because I wasn't points based, I was leaving cert applied, I got a merit for that, so I had to go through National Learning Network, in other words, to get into where I am today. So here I swiftly move on to so now I will leave, so basically what I'm doing at the moment is I'm now an Access Student Level 6 Major Award for mature students. So what that is that's a pathway in UCD that basically mature students can go to, and they get their GPA conversion to CAO points. And due to the fact if you stay in UCD, they can guarantee you a place in most of their courses the following September. Yeah, so for my after the level 6, which will lead me on to a level 8 in social policy sociology in September 24 for 3 years. And if I'm successful, it will lead me on to a master's in social care and probation officer at level 9 for 2 years. Now, this gets interesting. So Dragon Software, I'd never heard of this until I moved to UCD, and I started to finally got some technology input from a fantastic what they call assistive technology coordinator called Emily Smith. So Dragon Software, and what is it? It's dictation software originally created for American medical professionals to dictate letters, and now being used for students like me. You can say such things as open or switch between programs. You can say such as open Outlook or switch to open program. So like I could open Outlook and then open Word, and Word would be on my screen. So I'd say to the computer, switch to Outlook, and it would just do it without me needing to go near the mouse or keyboard. So with the Dragon as well, Dragon software, and how can it benefit a person like me with CVI? With Dragon, you can control your laptop, tablet, PC by voice. I have it, and I got funding for it. Generally, if you go to buy it in Ireland, it's about 800 to €1,000 for the software. But because I got under the third level higher education, I got money there. Money was there for me to be able to get this program for free from the college, in other words. Yeah. So top tips I could give. So before I start with this particular one, which is top tips to help parents and families with kids with children navigate childhood, I'm going to tell 2 stories. One of the first one, which was about meeting the Irish president, I was in Enable Ireland school. I was in Andrew at the time, but we were meeting her in Enable Ireland school, which is just around the corner. My mum had said to my maths teacher that, look, eyesight issues. A room like this really isn't very good for him for eyesight reasons and everything like that. And basically she just ignored it. And my mum settled my brother's sister into the crowd, and my dad came and joined us. And my mum then went to find me because she thought, where am I? She couldn't find me. She found me in the fetal position. I was completely blind at this point because my sensory system first thing to go is my eyesight. And in the cases of this, basically, she didn't think of anything other than me. The curtains came down, she lifted me up. I don't remember any of this, but apparently her clothes were torn, her skin was torn, and that's how distressed I was. And for when she went to pick me up, the maths teacher turned around to my mum and said, maybe next time he might learn to behave himself. Which my mum kind of thought, well, that's wrong because I'd asked you to take him out and you didn't. Basically, she brought me to the staff room, and one of the other teachers said, does he want a hot chocolate? She got me by a fire door to the fresh air, took my jacket, jumper, everything off. I was boiling at this point from being in such a packed environment. Then the second story I want to tell you, which brings me into top tips for positive and what parents can do to help their navigate childhood with CVI, is if you're out in a crowded place and your child has CVI, whatever you do not wear the same color as everyone else, because someone like me will not spot you. An example I will use from the conferences I fondly remember is Janet's husband, Jeff, who wears the brightest colored jumpers I've ever seen a guy wear in my life. I've never seen such a great variety he has. And I'm able to know straight away, even without my glasses on, that that's Jeff in the jumper, or likewise Janet in a bright color. Or my mum will wear something distinctive, either green, pink, something bright that will stand out. Or if they don't have a item of clothing, my sister has a turmeric mustard colored bag that we got her in one of the CVI trips actually to Northampton from Next, that she would bring out if we're going out or whatever. And finally, the last thing I'd like to say before my time is up is, if your kids are struggling to find stuff on beds, do not use patterned bed sheets, use plain bed sheets. And so this was something Gordon told us about, was that if my mum would tell him, well, if I needed to change your clothes during the night, I'd go to the drawer and get them. But then if my mum put my items of clothing out on the bed, and she would say, why aren't you getting dressed? She could never understand this. And Gordon was like, well, do you have a patterned duvet or do you have a plain duvet? Oh, we've got a jungle book or something duvet cover like every other kid wants. Get rid of it. Just have one color. Even to this day, I'm now 26 going on 27, and I still love just plain sheets because they're so easy to see the detail in, compared to having sheets that I would not be able to find. Now, go back on the point of what Rebecca was saying about the cane, I don't like the mobility canes because of that exact reason, because I get a lot of what I describe as tennis elbow vibrations in the wrist, to the point that I just don't want to use it, to the point that when I'm out with family, I'd hold on to my dad or my mum or my sister. If we're in town, one strategy I developed, which my sister helped me develop, was that if we're walking down a big area of Dublin, like Grafton Street or Connell Street, or Henry Street, even three of the biggest streets in Dublin, whoever's with me will walk on my right, so that I can deal with people coming from my left, but I can deal with people from one side of my body. But because my right side is more blind than my left, I prefer if they're there, because if I know they're there, I know they're shielding me from the people bashing into me. But if they're not, I get very, very, very stressed and very overwhelmed, to the point that I could end up ringing somebody like my mum or dad in a crowd if I know they're around town, to come and find me, because I will not get my way out of a crowd at all in any circumstance because of my vision. The other story was about a shopping trip where people had all my family, including myself, had worn black or dark blue jackets. So I sat down on like a big concrete seat they had there because we're all sitting down for a bit of a break. And I said to my mum, I want to go back to the car. And my mum said, what's going on? I said, I just want to go back to the car. You guys enjoy your time here. You come back, we'll go home, be fine. And she was like, no, I'm not letting you go back to the car. Why do you want to go back to the car? I said, I just want to go back to the car. I don't want to do this anymore. And she said to me, at this point, I was very tired. I was on the brink of tears anyway. And my mum said, Art, is it because you keep on losing us? And at that point, I cracked into tears because it was so embarrassing for the fact that I was out with my family, that 4 out of 5 of us could find each other, but I couldn't. And so from that day, since that day, my mum's worn either a bright item of clothing, whether it's the top, dress, cardigan, jacket, bag, like there's a specific bag she will always bring to the likes of concerts, to Bloom, which is a flower show in Ireland here. It's a bit like Chelsea, in other words. Or if she's not coming with me, my dad would wear this particular green jacket. My dad has 2, which I like him wearing. So quite often going on holidays, I'll ask him, look, Peter, if you're going to bring a jacket, you bring maybe one of these because these are easy for me to see. He has no difficulty in it because they're basically saying, look, you tell me what you want me to bring to make your time more enjoyable when we're away as a family. Um, so finally, thank you for listening, and any questions or queries you have in relation to anything I've said today, please email the email on screen. Now, that's not I've decided designated Yahoo email address to CVI stuff because I'm losing the CVI stuff in my email, in my own main one. So, and then underneath you'll see my mobile. So that's my personal mobile phone number. If you want to WhatsApp me, or alternatively, if you prefer to go through social media, I don't have my social medias up there, but I can send a slide on if upon request for a name or LinkedIn profile. So I think other than that, I'm now in my college in UCD doing my level 6. I've done 3, 4, 5, and 6. The quick last story I'll tell you, which was probably one of the more traumatic ones for me, was my last module in my previous college national learning network. I had a tutor who turned around and told me that he was wasting his time reading my reports on my eyesight and doing any other training I'd asked him to do. All the other tutors for that course had done it. And I asked him why he wouldn't do it. And his response was, well, if you were a full-time student in my course, I wouldn't have a problem. But what's the point in me wasting my time on you when you only have one module with me? And yet this module was Excel. So if you use Excel, you know how terrifying it is as someone with full eyesight. But asking someone with CVI to do formulas that wouldn't even fit onto a 21-inch monitor screen is terrifying. In June of last year, I persisted. I kept on saying I was going to give up. My mum was like, no, Art, keep going, keep going, keep going. I walked away from that module with the distinction. So only 2% out of anyone who does that module gets that. And for someone with CVI to get that, I have kicked more dreams than I could have ever done before. And of course, I've hit 2 of my biggest dreams in 2 years. One of which was finally getting to UCD, which was my dream college anyway. I always knew I wanted to go there because most of the family have. So I thought, well, it's in the families that keep it going. And my other biggest dream is my other biggest goal's been hit and dream, which was to travel to Australia on my own solo to visit my family. So my mum's family is from Australia, so they're over there, and so is my dad's sister and her family and her family's kids. So I'm going over in June to fly over for a month over to Australia, and I'm flying there and back solo. And because I'm going solo, because I also have epilepsy, I've saved enough money to go business. And I'm only doing that because of the disabilities. If I didn't have the disabilities, I wouldn't be doing it myself because it's a lot of money, to be honest with you. I'm not going to say how much it is. It's just a lot of money. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. It's a really big thing to come and speak with, you know, all the challenges that you have, and thank you so much for sharing. That concludes everybody that's here to speak tonight. I think, Jane, I'm not sure how much time we have left, if there's any particular questions in the chat, but I'll probably hand things back to you at this point.
Sorry, I've got some questions I can answer if Jane wants, that have come up in
please do.
It's just, I thought then at least someone, sorry, I've just written them down. There are some answers. Another thing for Steffi, I don't know if she's back. Steffi, there are more and more young people who would not fit the profile you talked about, and these are the ones who are being missed, because even with the mild CP, the very mild CP that we're thinking of, Rebecca, no one, it was a swimming coach that picked up on that, and then she was referred to a neurologist. The other thing, someone had mentioned about Down syndrome. Now, young people with Down syndrome, it is not a per se with every single child, but if you think many children with Down syndrome have had heart issues, maybe lack of oxygen, and those children are the ones who are at risk. And I do know of a lot. Now, because of the nature of Down syndrome, and this is not my interpretation or words, but it often is talked about as with an element of learning disability. If these children are not getting the support for the CVI, nobody realises, they're not assessed properly, that is going to be worse, and that is the label. Everybody just puts things down to that. So if you support someone with Down syndrome, or you know of someone with Down syndrome and maybe is presenting with some of these CVI behaviours, it's important to get them referred. Someone else had put something about CVI and ASC and the daughter with traits. I will quote Gordon Dutton on this, because I firmly believe it with all the reading and studying I've done over the past 15 years on this. You have to look at the CVI, you look at what are the behaviours of CVI, and then you look at other behaviours that child might present with, and then if those aren't attributed to CVI or aren't potentially linked, then you look at what they may be associated with, if that makes sense. And if you think of some of the things Art's talked about, and some of the behaviour when he was small and how frightening it is, you can see.
I forgot, sorry, John, I forgot to mention about the toddle trucks. The reason why a toddle truck was in the pictures was because when Gordon Dutton was assessing me, he turned around to my mum and said, does Art like pushing things? And she said, yeah, we can't get the toddle truck off him, and especially in a supermarket, we can't get a trolley off him. And he says, well, that's because that's the way Art's feeling the way through his environment. And since then, the other thing I got was 4-wheeler suitcases, because 2-wheelers were horrendous, because I got kicked over in the airport by another passenger who kicked along, you know, like the gym-shaped bags. I had one of those when we were going on Foundry, we used to split suitcases. He kicked that so hard that I fell forward straight into my dad. And my dad was like, what was that? And I said, oh, the guy's up after kicking the suitcase, I've been wheeling for you. And so since then, since I've had 4 wheels, I wouldn't look back on 2 wheels ever again for going through an airport, because the 4 wheels are so good. Like, you can tell simply by a drop of level. It will tell you if it's dropped level, because you'll feel it.
I'll give you guide. Yeah, I was going to say it'll give you guidance. The other thing was, I would think it's important to have cane use, because people don't realise that you actually have got a hemiplegia. So obviously, for someone who's got another physical thing, it's like with Suzanne talking about Zach, that needs to be thought about. It's not something that everybody with CVI struggles with, so I just think it's important to reiterate that. It was really helpful, Zach, to hear you talking about the plain clothing and the impact that things like that have on you outside. I think Gordon Dutton, I must say this to you all before you all leave, and it's really sad, he has retired. He comes to conferences, he doesn't see patients anymore. Just in case any of you were wondering about that, I thought it's important in case you contact us. He doesn't see people anymore.
You know, it was about 20 years ago or 21 years ago when I got diagnosed.
Yeah.
There's a couple more things in chat. Could RP alongside CVI actually be field loss due to CVI rather than RP?
I would have thought they should know, because RP, obviously, we're talking about retinitis pigmentosa to people maybe who've not. Yeah, that is a retinal issue, or obviously the cells deteriorate, and so your vision actually becomes like a tunnel vision. So obviously I couldn't answer on that. The ophthalmologist should know that, because RP usually is easily diagnosed. I must admit, I don't know of anybody with oh yes, of course, I don't want to ask, but if this is a very premature baby, and this is another thing, not retinitis pigmentosa, I'm thinking of ARP. Are you meaning RP, retinopathy of prematurity? Sorry, the person who put this in, because that would fit with the CVI. If it's retinopathy of prematurity, sorry, that would fit with CVI, because you can have children who have born very premature, or premature babies are very high risk, 34 weeks and back of CVI. So if that person could let me know if it's, no, retinitis pigmentosa, she's put it in that case, I would have thought your ophthalmologist should be looking at that and they should be able to rule it out. The other thing was field testing. A child has got to be able to sit and cooperate and press buttons, so don't go jumping up and down if your ophthalmologist isn't doing that. Having said that, children with complex needs can be assessed. We set up a clinic to do it, so it can be done, but don't expect your child, if they're not old enough or able to do that, to get a field test.
Right, shall we squeeze one more question in and then I'll have to wrap up?
Anything for Steffi in there? I'm just thinking.
Let's see, what's the next? Oh, just to thank you. So there's a question about, is CVI typical for Charge syndrome?
I've seen that. I can say I work with a few children with Charge syndrome who did have CVI. To be truthful, I don't know, but I would expect it. These children had other very complex things going on. Collobomas and CVI, I don't think there is necessarily a connection. Nothing I've come across. I've worked with children who've got coloboma. That's when the eye structure, for those people, maybe parents are not aware, doesn't form completely. So you have like maybe a little keyhole, or sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's not, but quite often you can see a visible sort of hole in the iris. It sounds bad, but the iris isn't complete, but it can be something that's at the back. But I haven't, I must admit, heard of coloboma and CVI, but Charge syndrome, yes, I've heard of and worked with children with Charge and CVI.
Thank you. Steffi, I don't know if you noticed any other questions or wanted to know. I just, there's two more best. You've had loads of, CVI and APD. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. There's a few come in. We might have to ask people to email you.
Yeah, 24 weeks premature, you are in, that is an incredibly high risk. And what annoys me as a final thing, 50% of children with cerebral palsy, hydrocephalus, why are they not being tracked and monitored? Premature babies, there are known high risk groups, very high risk groups of CVI that are not at present being monitored by anybody. Sorry.
You've had some messages come in, Art, and actually for Rebecca as well, just saying thank you for your stories, and for Suze. There was, I'll just read this one out. Oh my gosh, amazing. So amazing stories from Suze, Rebecca, and thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, Janet and Stephanie, for all your important information. I think people have really appreciated it. I want to send my thanks to Suzanne. Suzanne is a very valued member of our Look community, and yeah, it's just great that you pulled this together, Suze. You knew exactly who the right experts were to come and talk to us. In Look, we really believe in ambassadors. Well, we have Look mentors, and so Art, you provide that for the CVI Society, which is amazing. Really great to hear from you.
The other thing I was going to say is, if people would prefer to contact me over social media, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And if you don't know how to spell my name, go on to the team website for CVI Society. Yeah. You'll see me there.
On there.
Okay, thank you. So all I need to do is just say thank you very much. We have panel events once a month, and we have a chat session once a month. So any of the parents on this call, if you need to come and meet other parents like Suze and me and Joe, and just get that expert, talk about troubleshooting, celebrate our children. We are here once a month online as well.